Marcus had noticed the driver kept checking the same car in his mirrors, and that car had been following them for the last 3 cities. The thumb went up automatically as Marcus stood beside Interstate 40 outside Amarillo, Texas. The afternoon sun was brutal, and he'd been waiting for over 2 hours with only one water bottle that was now nearly empty. When the dusty blue pickup truck pulled over, Marcus didn't hesitate to jog toward it. The driver was a man in his late 40s with graying hair, wearing a worn baseball cap and a nervous expression that seemed permanently etched into his weathered face. His hands gripped the steering wheel with white knuckles, and his eyes darted constantly between the road ahead and the rearview mirror. "Where you headed?" the driver asked, his voice carrying a slight tremor. "West toward Albuquerque," Marcus replied, sliding his weathered backpack into the truck bed. His wavy brown hair was damp with sweat, and his blue-green eyes reflected both relief at finding a ride and curiosity about the driver's obvious anxiety. "Perfect. I'm going that way myself. Name's Carl." Marcus climbed into the passenger seat, immediately noticing the truck's interior was meticulously clean despite its aged exterior. Carl pulled back onto the highway with careful precision, maintaining exactly the speed limit while his eyes continued their nervous dance between the road and his mirrors. "Thanks for stopping, Carl. I'm Marcus." But something about Carl's driving behavior felt off from the very beginning. As they merged into traffic, Marcus watched Carl's routine unfold. Every 30 seconds, Carl would glance at the rearview mirror, then the driver's side mirror, then back to the road. His jaw was clenched, and a thin sheen of perspiration covered his forehead despite the air conditioning running at full blast. "Hot day," Marcus commented, trying to start a conversation. "Yeah," Carl replied tersely, his attention clearly elsewhere. Marcus followed Carl's gaze to the rearview mirror and caught a glimpse of what appeared to be a dark sedan several cars back. When he looked again a few moments later, the same car seemed to still be there. "Everything okay?" Marcus asked. Carl's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Just tired. Long drive." But Marcus could sense there was much more to Carl's anxiety than simple fatigue. 20 miles down the road, Carl suddenly took an exit that led to a small town Marcus hadn't expected to visit. The move seemed impulsive, unplanned. "I thought we were heading straight through to Albuquerque," Marcus said. "Need gas," Carl replied, though the fuel gauge showed the tank was still half full. As they drove through the small town's main street, Marcus noticed Carl was still checking his mirrors obsessively. More concerning, when Marcus looked back, he could see the same dark sedan from the highway following them through the town's streets. Carl pulled into a gas station and sat in the truck for a moment, scanning the area carefully before getting out. "I'll be right back," he said. But instead of going toward the gas pumps, he walked directly to the convenience store and positioned himself where he could watch the parking lot through the window. Marcus waited in the truck, growing increasingly uneasy. The dark sedan pulled into the parking lot and stopped at the far end, near the air pump. The driver remained inside, wearing sunglasses despite being in shadow. Marcus couldn't make out any details about the person, but their posture suggested they were watching Carl's truck. When Carl returned, he was carrying a cup of coffee he clearly didn't want, and moving with the quick, nervous steps of someone trying not to appear as frightened as they actually were. "Carl," Marcus said as they pulled back onto the main road, "is someone following us?" Carl's reaction was immediate and telling. His whole body tensed, and he nearly swerved into the oncoming lane before correcting course. "Why would you ask that?" "Because there's been a dark sedan behind us since we left Amarillo, and it just followed us through that town." Carl was quiet for a long moment, his internal struggle visible in his clenched jaw and white knuckles. "Marcus," he finally said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." Marcus felt his pulse quicken. "Okay. Are you working with whoever's in that car?" The question caught Marcus completely off guard. "Working with them?" "Carl, I don't even know who them is. I'm just a hitchhiker who needed a ride west." Carl studied Marcus's face while trying to keep his eyes on the road. You're telling me it's just a coincidence that you needed a ride exactly when I was passing through Amarillo? Yes, that's exactly what I'm telling you. Carl, what's going on here? Carl drove in silence for several minutes, clearly debating how much to reveal. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I think someone wants me dead. The statement hung in the air between them like a physical presence. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. What makes you think that? Because 3 weeks ago someone tried to run me off the road in Oklahoma. 2 weeks ago my hotel room in Kansas was broken into while I was at dinner. And now there's a car that's been following me for over 2. Carl reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a small piece of paper. And because I found this note on my windshield yesterday morning. Marcus read the note. Stop running. We know where you're going. But the most disturbing detail was still to come. Carl, what did you do that would make someone want to kill you? Carl's laugh was bitter and humorless. That's the thing, Marcus. I didn't do anything. I saw something I wasn't supposed to see. What kind of something? The kind that gets witnesses eliminated. As they drove through the New Mexico desert, Carl began to explain the events that had turned him from a quiet small-town mechanic into a man running for his life. 3 months earlier, Carl had been working late at his garage in a small town outside Tulsa, when he heard vehicles arriving in the industrial area behind his shop. Curious about who would be conducting business so late at night, he had climbed onto his roof to investigate. I saw 3 men transferring something from one truck to another. Large wooden crates, maybe 24 of them. What was in the crates? I couldn't tell from that distance, but the way they were handling them, careful, like they were valuable or dangerous. Carl had watched the transaction for about 20 minutes, noting license plate numbers and taking photos with his phone. I figured it was probably stolen goods or drugs. I planned to call the police in the morning. But Carl never got the chance to make that call. The next morning, Carl discovered that his garage had been broken into during the night. Nothing appeared to be missing, but his computer had been accessed and several files had been deleted. That's when I realized they knew I had been watching. Carl found that his phone photos from the previous night had been remotely deleted, and his cloud backup had been wiped clean. Whoever these people are, they have serious technical capabilities. Within a week, Carl began noticing signs of surveillance. Cars parked outside his house at odd hours. Phone calls that consisted only of breathing before the line went dead. His mail being opened and resealed. I went to the local police, but they said there wasn't enough evidence to investigate. They suggested I was being paranoid. But Carl's paranoia proved justified when someone tried to kill him. 2 weeks after the break-in, Carl was driving home from work when a large pickup truck attempted to force his car off a bridge. Only quick reflexes and a bit of luck had saved his life. The truck had no license plates and tinted windows. After it missed ramming me into the guardrail, it just drove away. That night, Carl packed everything he could fit in his truck and left town, beginning a journey that had now lasted 3 weeks. I've been moving constantly, never staying in the same place more than one night, paying for everything in cash. Where are you going? I have a brother in California who might be able to help me figure out what to do. He works for a federal agency. But Carl's escape plan was about to hit a serious obstacle. As they crested a hill, Marcus saw a roadblock ahead. 2 police cars were positioned across both lanes, with officers directing traffic into a single inspection line. Carl's face went white. This is it. They found me. Carl, that might just be a routine checkpoint. Immigration safety inspection, something like that. Or it might be them using law enforcement connections to trap me. Carl pulled over to the side of the road, his hands shaking as he gripped the steering wheel. Marcus, I need you to listen carefully. In my glove compartment there's a flash drive. If something happens to me, I need you to get that drive to my brother. Marcus opened the glove compartment and found a small USB drive wrapped in plastic. What's on it? Everything I could remember about what I saw that night. License plates, descriptions, times, locations. It might not be much, but it's all the evidence I have. Carl wrote his brother's name and address on a piece of paper. Thomas Manning, San Diego. He's a federal investigator. He'll know what to do with this information. But approaching the checkpoint revealed Carl's fears might be justified. As they got closer to the roadblock, Marcus could see that this wasn't a routine traffic stop. The officers were checking identification very carefully, taking photos of drivers and making notes about each vehicle. Carl, they're looking for someone specific. They're looking for me. Carl made a sudden decision that would change both their lives. Instead of continuing toward the checkpoint, he made a sharp U-turn and began driving back the way they had come. Almost immediately, Marcus heard sirens behind them. Carl, now they're definitely chasing us. I can't let them catch me, Marcus. If they're working with the people who want me dead, surrendering means dying. The high-speed chase that followed was unlike anything Marcus had ever experienced. Carl drove with desperate skill, taking turns at dangerous speeds, and using his knowledge of back roads to stay ahead of the pursuing police cars. But more vehicles joined the chase with each passing mile. Carl, this is insane. Even if some of those cops are corrupt, not all of them can be. How do I tell the difference? How do I know which ones will protect me and which ones will hand me over to whoever wants me dead? Marcus realized that Carl's weeks of paranoia and fear had created a mindset where every authority figure was potentially an enemy. We need to get off the road, Marcus said. Find somewhere to hide and figure out our next move. Carl took an exit that led to a state park, hoping the wooded area would provide cover. But as they drove deeper into the park, Marcus realized they might be trapping themselves. Carl, if we go too far into this park, we'll be cornered. I know, but I need time to think. The temporary reprieve gave Carl a chance to explain more about what he had witnessed. Marcus, what I saw that night wasn't just smuggling. The way those men were dressed, the equipment they had, the coordination of their operation. This was professional, military or intelligence level. What do you think was in those crates? I've been thinking about that for 3 months. Given the size, weight, and the way they were handling them, weapons, high-end weapons. Carl believed he had witnessed an illegal arms transfer, possibly involving stolen military equipment or foreign weapons being moved through the United States. The kind of operation that people in very high places would kill to keep secret. But their conversation was interrupted by the sound of helicopters approaching. They brought air support, Carl said, his voice hollow with despair. This is over. Marcus looked up through the truck's windshield and could see 2 helicopters circling the park area. Carl, maybe it's time to surrender. If this many law enforcement agencies are involved, maybe some of them can be trusted. Or maybe this proves how deep the corruption goes. Carl's paranoia had reached the point where even overwhelming police presence seemed like evidence of conspiracy rather than legitimate law enforcement. Marcus realized he had to make a difficult decision. Carl, give me the flash drive. What? If you won't trust the police, then let me handle this. I'm not involved in whatever conspiracy you think exists. I can take the evidence to your brother. Carl stared at Marcus, trying to decide whether to trust someone he had known for only a few hours with information that might cost both their lives. How do I know you're not part of this? Because if I were part of it, I would have signaled them by now. Or I would have taken the evidence from you already. Carl considered this logic and slowly handed Marcus the flash drive. Promise me you'll get this to Thomas if something happens to me. I promise. But Carl wasn't finished with his preparations. Marcus, there's something else you need to know. The note I showed you earlier wasn't the only one. Carl pulled out 2 more pieces of paper from his wallet. The second note read, "Your family knows what you saw." The third note read, "Stop running or they pay the price." Marcus felt sick reading the threats. Carl, you have family? Ex-wife and daughter in Colorado. We've been divorced for 5 years. But I still care about them. Have you contacted them? Warned them? I tried. My ex-wife thinks I'm having some kind of nervous breakdown. She won't take my calls anymore. The situation was even more complicated than Marcus had realized. Carl wasn't just running to save his own life, he was running to protect his family from consequences of what he had witnessed. Carl, if your family is in danger, then running away isn't solving the problem. What else can I do? If I surface, they'll kill me. If I stay hidden, maybe they'll leave my family alone. Or maybe they're using your family as bait to keep you running and scared. Marcus was beginning to understand the psychological trap Carl had fallen into. The threats against his family had made him feel like he couldn't trust anyone or seek help from any official source. The sound of approaching vehicles interrupted their conversation. Police cars were entering the park from multiple directions, effectively surrounding Carl's truck. "This is it," Carl said. "They found us." A bullhorn crackled to life. "Driver of the blue pickup truck, exit your vehicle with your hands visible." Carl looked at Marcus one final time. "Get that evidence to my brother, and tell him to check on Sarah and Emma in Colorado." "Who are Sarah and Emma?" "My ex-wife and daughter. If something happens to me, they need protection." Carl opened the driver's door and stepped out of the truck with his hands raised. Marcus watched as a dozen officers surrounded Carl, weapons drawn but not pointed directly at him. But what happened next surprised everyone. The lead officer approached Carl cautiously. "Carl Manning, we've been looking for you for 3 weeks." "I know," Carl replied. "You can kill me, but the evidence is safe." The officer looked confused. "Kill you?" "Mr. Manning, we're here to help you. Your brother Thomas sent us." Carl's expression shifted from terror to confusion. "Thomas?" "Agent Thomas Manning, FBI. He's been worried sick about you since you disappeared." Marcus began to understand that Carl's paranoia might have caused him to misinterpret the situation entirely. The officer continued. "Mr. Manning, we've been trying to locate you because your brother believes you witnessed something related to an ongoing federal investigation." "You're not here to arrest me? We're here to offer you protective custody while we investigate what you saw." Carl's legs nearly gave out as 3 weeks of fear and adrenaline finally caught up with him. But the full truth was even more complex. Agent Sarah Chen, the lead investigator, explained the situation as Carl and Marcus sat in the back of a police vehicle. "Mr. Manning, your brother received your message about witnessing suspicious activity, but when he tried to contact you, you had disappeared." "What message?" "The voicemail you left 3 weeks ago, describing men transferring weapons in the industrial area behind your garage." Carl looked confused. "I never left Thomas a voicemail." Agent Chen showed Carl a recording on her phone. It was clearly Carl's voice, describing exactly what he had witnessed that night. "Carl, that's definitely your voice," Marcus said. "But I never made that call. I was too scared to contact anyone." Agent Chen and Marcus exchanged glances. If Carl hadn't made the call, then who had? The mystery deepened when Agent Chen revealed more details. "Mr. Manning, the reason we've been looking for you is that your testimony is crucial to a federal investigation into a stolen weapons ring operating out of Oklahoma. So what I saw was real. Very real. And very dangerous. The men you observed were transferring military-grade weapons that had been stolen from a National Guard armory." Agent Chen explained that the FBI had been tracking this weapons trafficking ring for over a year. "Your witness account provided the first solid lead we've had on their distribution methods." "But if I never called Thomas, how did you know what I saw?" "That's what we're trying to figure out." Agent Chen's investigation revealed that someone had been monitoring Carl's activities from the beginning. "Mr. Manning, your garage's security system was compromised 3 months ago. Someone installed remote access software that allowed them to monitor your computer and phone activities." "You mean they were watching me the whole time?" "It appears so. They knew you had witnessed their operation. They knew you had taken photos. And they knew you were planning to contact law enforcement." Marcus began to piece together the timeline. "So they deleted his photos and broke into his garage to scare him." "Exactly. But they made a mistake." Agent Chen explained the criminals had used Carl's own phone to call his brother, thinking they were providing false information that would lead investigators away from their actual operation. He didn't realize that Agent Manning would recognize the strategic value of your testimony and launch a protection operation. But the most shocking revelation was still to come. Mr. Manning, the people who have been following you for the past 3 weeks aren't criminals trying to kill you. Carl stared at Agent Chen in disbelief. What? They're undercover federal agents assigned to protect you. The dark sedan that had been following Carl across 3 states was actually an FBI surveillance team tasked with keeping him safe while the Bureau tried to locate him officially. The threats you received were actually coded messages from our team, trying to convince you to stop running so we could make contact. Marcus looked at the notes Carl had shown him earlier. In a new context, "Stop running. We know where you're going" could be interpreted as a protective warning rather than a death threat. Carl's 3 weeks of terror had been based on a complete misunderstanding. The attempted ramming incident in Oklahoma, Agent Chen continued, was actually our agents trying to prevent you from driving into an ambush the criminals had set up. An ambush? The weapons trafficking ring had figured out that you were the witness. They were planning to eliminate you, but our protective surveillance team intervened. Agent Chen showed Carl photos of the incident from the agent's perspective. The pickup truck that tried to force you off the bridge was actually pushing you away from a sniper position the criminals had established. Every incident that Carl had interpreted as evidence of a conspiracy to kill him had actually been evidence of a federal operation to protect him. But this revelation raised new questions. "Agent Chen," Marcus said, "if you've been protecting Carl this whole time, why didn't you just approach him direct?" "We tried, multiple times. But Mr. Manning's paranoia made him interpret every approach as a threat." Agent Chen explained that federal agents had attempted to make contact with Carl at gas stations, restaurants, and hotels during his 3-week flight. Every time we got close, he would run. We realized that direct contact wasn't going to work. "So you set up the roadblock?" "The roadblock was our last attempt to safely intercept him before the criminals figured out where he was going." Agent Chen revealed that the weapons trafficking ring had also been tracking Carl and was closing in on his location. "Mr. Manning, you were probably less than 24 hours away from being found by people who actually do want you dead." The federal protection operation had been a race against time to reach Carl before the criminals did. But the case was about to become even more complex. Agent Chen received a phone call that changed her expression from relief to concern. "Mr. Manning, we have a problem. The weapons trafficking ring has escalated their operations." "What do you mean?" "They've taken hostages." Agent Chen explained that the criminals, realizing that their witness was in federal custody, had decided to force a trade. They're holding 3 civilians at a warehouse in Albuquerque. They want you in exchange for the hostages' lives. Carl's face went white. "What civilians?" "A family that was in the wrong place at the wrong time. A father, mother, and teenage daughter." Marcus realized that Carl was facing an impossible choice: his own safety versus the lives of innocent people. "I'll do it," Carl said immediately. "I'll make the trade." "Absolutely not," Agent Chen replied. "That's not how federal law enforcement operates." But Carl had already made his decision. "Agent Chen, I've been running scared for 3 weeks while innocent people were at risk because of what I saw. I won't let anyone else die because I was too afraid to do the right thing." Agent Chen tried to explain that the FBI had other options, but Carl was insistent. "These people have been threatening my family and now they're holding hostages. This ends now." Marcus watched Carl transform from a terrified fugitive into someone determined to take responsibility for the consequences of his testimony. "What if there's another way?" Marcus asked. Agent Chen looked at him with interest. "What do you mean?" "Carl has been running for 3 weeks. These criminals think they know his psychological profile, that he's paranoid, scared, and isolated. And what if we use their assumptions against them?" Marcus proposed a plan that would take advantage of the criminals' overconfidence. They expect Carl to be so scared that he'll do exactly what they demand. They probably haven't planned for the possibility that he might have backup or that he might try to outsmart them. Agent Chen began to see the potential in Marcus's suggestion. You're thinking of a reverse psychology operation. Exactly. Make them think they're getting what they want while actually walking into a trap. Carl listened to the plan with growing approval. Instead of simply trading himself for the hostages, he would appear to surrender, while federal agents positioned themselves to rescue everyone simultaneously. But this requires precise timing, Agent Chen warned. If anything goes wrong, both Carl and the hostages could be killed. The operation that followed was the most dangerous thing Marcus had ever been involved in. 3 hours later, Carl stood in the parking lot of an abandoned warehouse in Albuquerque, apparently alone and ready to surrender himself to save the hostages. But Marcus was hidden in a surveillance vehicle 200 yards away, monitoring radio communications between the FBI tactical team and coordinating the rescue operation. "Suspect vehicle approaching," came the radio report. 2 subjects visible, no sign of additional backup. The weapons traffickers had arrived in a white van, confident that their psychological manipulation had worked perfectly. But they had no idea they were walking into a federal trap. Carl approached the van as instructed, his hands visible and his demeanor appropriately submissive. To any observer, he appeared to be a scared witness finally giving up his futile attempt to escape. "Where are the hostages?" Carl called out. "They're safe. Get in the van." But as Carl approached the vehicle, federal agents began moving into position around the warehouse. Marcus watched the operation unfold through binoculars, his heart racing as he realized how quickly things could go wrong. The moment Carl got into the van, the rescue operation would begin. "All units, target is in the vehicle. Move to rescue positions." Marcus could see tactical officers approaching the warehouse from multiple directions, their movements coordinated and precise. But the criminals inside the warehouse were more prepared than anyone had anticipated. The radio crackled with urgent updates. "Multiple armed subjects inside the warehouse. Hostages are secured but heavily guarded." Agent Chen's voice came through the communication system. "This is more than a simple hostage trade. They're planning something bigger." Marcus realized that Carl's testimony had threatened a much larger operation than anyone had understood. The weapons trafficking wasn't just about stolen military equipment, it was about arming a domestic terrorist organization. But the most shocking discovery was still to come. As federal agents breached the warehouse, they found evidence that the weapons trafficking ring had been planning attacks on federal buildings in 3 states. "Marcus," Agent Chen said over the radio, "what Carl witnessed wasn't just a transfer of stolen weapons. It was the distribution of equipment for coordinated terrorist attacks." The stakes of the entire operation suddenly became clear. Carl hadn't just witnessed a crime, he had accidentally uncovered a domestic terrorism plot that could have killed hundreds of people. The hostages weren't random victims, Agent Chen continued. They were witnesses to the terrorists' planning meetings. The warehouse raid revealed maps, target lists, and detailed attack plans that had been months in the making. Carl's decision to run instead of immediately contacting authorities had actually given the FBI time to investigate and uncover the full scope of the terrorist network. The rescue operation succeeded, but barely. All 3 hostages were recovered safely, and Carl was rescued from the van without injury. But the tactical team discovered that the terrorists had been planning to kill both Carl and the hostages regardless of whether the trade was completed. "This was never about silencing a witness," Agent Chen explained afterward. "This was about eliminating everyone who knew about their attack plans." Marcus learned that Carl's 3 weeks of paranoid flight had actually saved his life by preventing the terrorists from locating and killing him before the FBI could investigate. Carl's apparent paranoia turned out to be justified survival instincts. But the case revealed something even more significant. The weapons trafficking ring was connected to a network of domestic terrorist cells operating in 12 states, all planning coordinated attacks on federal facilities. "Carl's testimony didn't just help us solve a theft case," Agent Chen said. "It helped us prevent what could have been the largest domestic terrorist attack since Oklahoma City." The evidence found in the warehouse led to arrests of terrorist operatives across the country and the prevention of attacks that had been scheduled for the following month. Carl's accidental witness testimony had disrupted a terrorist network that had been operating for over 2 years. Marcus realized that what had started as a simple hitchhiking ride had evolved into participation in one of the most significant counterterrorism operations in recent history. 6 months later, Carl Manning was living under a new identity in federal witness protection, but he had requested one final meeting with Marcus before disappearing completely. They met at a small diner in Colorado, where Carl looked healthier and more relaxed than Marcus had ever seen him. "Marcus, I wanted to thank you for what you did that day. I didn't do much, I just listened and tried to help. You did more than that. You convinced me to trust the system instead of letting fear make my decisions." Carl explained that his new life in witness protection was actually an improvement over his previous existence. "I have meaningful work, a sense of purpose, and I know that my testimony helped save lives." But Carl had more news to share. "My ex-wife and daughter are also in the protection program now. The terrorist network had been planning to use them as leverage against me. How are they adjusting?" "Better than I expected. Sarah says she finally understands why I was so scared. And Emma thinks having a new identity is like being in a spy movie." Carl's family had been relocated together, giving them a chance to rebuild their relationships while staying safe from retaliation. "We're talking about getting remarried once this is all over." "When will it be over?" "The trials are scheduled for next year. After that, we'll have new identities permanently and can start over wherever we want." But Carl wanted to discuss Marcus's future as well. "Marcus, Agent Chen told me you're considering a career in federal law enforcement. I've been thinking about it. This experience showed me that I might be good at helping people in crisis situations." "You definitely are. You probably saved my life by keeping me calm and rational when I was ready to make decisions that would have gotten everyone killed." Carl handed Marcus a business card. "Agent Chen asked me to give you this. She said the FBI is always looking for people who can think clearly under pressure and connect with people who are scared." Marcus looked at the card. It was Agent Chen's direct contact information with a handwritten note. "Call me when you're ready to make a difference." The hitchhiking experience that had started with a simple ride request had opened a door to a completely different future. But Marcus wasn't ready to give up the road just yet. "I think I want to travel for another year or two before settling into a career. There are still places I want to see and experiences I want to have." "That makes sense. Just remember that those experiences are preparing you for whatever comes next." Carl stood to leave, then paused. "Marcus, can I give you some advice?" "Sure." "Trust your instincts about people. You were right about me. I wasn't dangerous, just scared. And you were right that the federal agents were trying to help, not hurt. That kind of judgment will serve you well in law enforcement or any other field." As Carl walked away, Marcus reflected on the lessons from their shared experience. Sometimes the most paranoid-seeming person is actually the most logical response to a genuinely dangerous situation. Carl's behavior had seemed irrational, but given the actual threat he was facing, his caution had probably saved his life. Sometimes the help you need comes from unexpected sources. Marcus had gotten into Carl's truck looking for transportation, but had ended up providing psychological support that had been crucial to resolving a terrorist threat. And sometimes a simple act of kindness, offering a scared man a calm, rational perspective, can have consequences far beyond what you could ever imagine. Marcus returned to hitchhiking with a new understanding of how individual actions can intersect with larger events in ways that change everything. The dark sedan that had been following Carl for 3 states hadn't been a threat. It had been protection. The roadblock that had seemed like a trap had actually been a rescue, and the paranoid fugitive who had seemed like a dangerous ride had actually been a hero whose accidental testimony had prevented a terrorist attack. 2 years later, Marcus did call Agent Chen and began a career with the FBI. His hitchhiking experiences had taught him to read people, stay calm under pressure, and find creative solutions to impossible problems. But he never forgot the lesson from that day in Carl's truck. The difference between a dangerous situation and a misunderstood situation often comes down to asking the right questions and listening to the answers with an open mind. Carl Manning's case became a training example used in federal law enforcement academies to teach agents about the psychology of witnesses under extreme stress. The blue pickup truck that had seemed like it was being pursued by criminals was actually being protected by federal agents who were racing against time to prevent a terrorist attack. And the hitchhiker who had thought he was getting a simple ride to Albuquerque had actually participated in one of the most significant counter-terrorism operations of the decade. Sometimes the most ordinary day can turn into the most extraordinary experience, and sometimes the most scared person you meet is actually the bravest.